UN peacekeepers in Lebanon calling for calm amid heightened tensions and violence between Israel and Iran-backed Hezbollah. That conflict is nearly a year old, which I couldn't believe next month is October.
I know.
I could not believe that because it seems so.
It's my daughter's birthday.
Still hostages. October 7th then? I didn't know that. Yesterday, Israel's military said that it struck hundreds of Hezbollah rocket launchers that were getting ready to fire, and this follows the exploding pagers and handheld radio attacks against Hezbollah earlier this week. Thousands were wounded, at least 37 people killed. Israel has not directly commented on those attacks, nor has it taken responsibility, but Hezbollah's leader has vowed to respond. For more on all this, let's bring in Firas Maksad, senior fellow with the Middle East Institute. Is there any way at this point, Firas, that this does not escalate, or is there some hope that, given some of the restraint, I don't know if you call it restraint, but if we talk about Iran and what could have been a possible retaliation in recent months that didn't really come to pass, could that happen again, or is the die now been cast, in your view?
Morning, Joe. Yeah, I mean, to discuss the parameters of the coming conflict, the trend lines first are very clear. They're clearly escalatory trend lines across the board. And both Iranian-backed Hezbollah and Israel are locked in a Mexican standoff. Israel wants Hezbollah to cease rocket fire across that border to allow for some 60,000 plus Israelis to come back to their homes. However, Hezbollah is simply unwilling to yield. And we have to understand that after October 7th of last year, Iran, Hezbollah, and the various proxies in the region, the militants that are under Iran's umbrella, declared a strategy of the united fronts, the unity of fronts across that Iranian-backed axis. So for Hezbollah to back away from its demand that a ceasefire in Gaza be declared first, that would mean to risk that entire alliance and that entire strategy. So I don't think that that's going to happen. And unfortunately, we're kind of locked into an escalatory cycle right now.
But Firas, the worst case scenario has not come to pass yet. And we've scratched our heads and asked about that. And people have said that Iran really isn't prepared to bring on the full wrath of Israel at this point in terms of its nuclear facilities and everything else. I don't want to say that that they fear Israel, but I guess that's what it is. Have they been less aggressive than you thought they'd be at this point, the Iranians?
Well, yes and no, because the Iranian strategy has always been to take the fight to Israel through 1,000 cuts rather than a knockout blow. They do not want a direct war with Israel. They understand that they will come out on the losing end of that. So they want to undermine Israel using asymmetric warfare, all these various proxies firing at Israel from Gaza, from Lebanon, Syria, the Houthis in Yemen. That is their strategy. So I'm not surprised that they've kept this relatively contained. Now, that said, I don't think that we're going to go from what is essentially up to today a border war to the nuclear option, which is Hezbollah firing its Iranian-made ballistic missiles, flattening parts of Tel Aviv, and Israel also flattening parts of Beirut. I think both parties are able to escalate, but keep this below the threshold of an all-out war. That said, Iran has made it very clear that if Israel threatens Hezbollah in any significant way, that it reserves the option to also jump in. And that's the worst-case scenario, that kind of contagion that brings others in the region into this war.
What do you think Israel is up to right now in terms of equipment moving? And I mean, I don't know how you connect the dots to what's next. What do you think is most likely?
Yeah, I mean, great question. We see that armored brigades and commando paratroopers are being moved out of Gaza further north to that Lebanon border. Clearly, Israel here bringing a lot of military capabilities and firepower to the war. The big question is, will there be a ground invasion? There will certainly be an an uptick in the tempo, broadening of the scope of Israeli attacks, pounding Hezbollah positions, its arms depots, its fighters, targeting some of its commanders. But will there be a ground component? And will Israel try to create, or recreate, I should say, some kind of a buffer zone? I think there's some daylight between Israel's stated war objectives of being able to return its residents to the north. I don't think that they're going to be able to achieve that solely using the military. They need a political outcome here, a deal of sorts that the Biden administration has put on the table. But I do think that they're very much capable of degrading that ring of fire that Iran has created around them, starting with Hezbollah, Iran's ace in the hole.
And how much leeway or how much time does Netanyahu and Israel, how much time does Netanyahu have? How much time does Israel have for the United States to be, fully behind what it's doing? It's been almost a year, and we've seen it. That was the worry right from the start, that the PR war would be difficult for Israel to win.
The PR war is difficult. It has been difficult in terms of what's happening in Gaza, the utter devastation visited on Gaza, and the human toll of that. It would probably be more difficult if there are significant loss of life in Lebanon. But listen, the Israelis know us well. They understand that this is an election cycle in the U.S. They understand that the Biden administration, where they're very frustrated, the fact that Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu has not found his way to some kind of a ceasefire in Gaza, that would then also unlock a solution in Lebanon, one that the Biden administration has pretty much negotiated, but which Hezbollah and Iran refused to sign on to without a ceasefire in Gaza first. So there's a great deal of frustration amongst the Biden administration. But I think Bibi Netanyahu understands also the limits of the kind of pressure, the political will in Washington right now to force this to an end. So you can bring a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink.